to start our rhythm pyramid, we start with our longest note. This is called a whole note, and a whole note takes up what we call a whole measure. That's why we call it a whole note. So this is a whole note. It looks like a donut, and a whole note gets 4 beats. So if I'm counting and I see a whole note, I would go 1, 2, 3, 4. It gets 4 beats. So I would hold that note for 4 beats if I saw it. Next, we have a half note. Now if you look, this half note is named appropriately because it is half of the length of a whole note. So if a whole note, we're going to do a little bit of math because music is just math in motion. We have our whole note that gets 4 beats. We have half of that. So how many beats would a half note get if it is half the length of the whole note? If you said 2, you're correct. So a half note gets 2 beats because it is half the length of the whole note. Up next, this should look very familiar to you guys from school, from elementary school. A lot of you probably know this as a ta or a do, but its actual name is a quarter note. And a quarter note, as you can see, is half of the length of the half note. So how many beats do you think the quarter note would get? Oh, great job, you said 1. That's amazing. Yes, a quarter note gets 1 beat. After the quarter note, we have something called an eighth note. You guys have also seen these before. This is an eighth note. These were your if you had 2 of them next to each other, it was TT or do day. So you guys have seen these before too. This is one by itself. This is 1/8 note. It is half the length of a quarter note. So if we have our eighth note and it's half the length of a quarter note, it would get a half a beat. Good job. We get a half of a beat. So that would also mean that 2/8 notes equals 1 beat. But we're only dealing with 1 right now. So that only gets a half of a beat. Now finally, there is one more that we're going to learn about. There are more than this. This little dude is called a 16th note. So this is a 16th note. It is half the length of an 8th note. So those of you who are really good at fractions should get this easy. It gets a quarter of a beat, or 1/4 of a beat. Now, I want you to think about money now. If I have a quarter note, and this quarter note gets 1 beat, and 1/16 note gets 1/4 of a beat, or a quarter of a beat, that means that just like 4 quarters make $1, 4/16 notes make 1 beat. And so that is how all of that is related. That is our rhythm tree. Go ahead and take a real good look at that. To recap, remember we have our whole note. It looks like a donut. Our whole note gets 4 beats. That's our longest note. After that, we have our half note, which has a stem, and the note head is not filled in. Notice that. The note head is not filled in. It is half the length of the whole note, so it gets 2 beats. Next, we have our quarter note, and this one has a stem, and the note head is filled in, and that gets 1 beat because it's half the length of a half note. Next, we have our eighth note. Our eighth note has this cute little thing here that we call a flag. That is called a flag. It's half the length of a quarter note, which makes it get half of a beat. And then finally, we have our 16th note, and a 16th note has 2 flags. So notice it has a little flag right there and right there. So it has 2 flags, half the length of an eighth note, so it gets a quarter of a beat. And there is your rhythm pyramid.